You're listening to the Flex Success podcast, where we teach you how to be less shit.
I'm your co-host Lizzy, and this is Dean. We'll be covering all topics relating to health, fitness, and bodybuilding.
Join us as we use our in the trenches experience and up-to-date science to provide you with information that you can actually use.
If you like what we do, be sure to give us a like, follow, share, and tag us on social media. Dean and I are going to riff on some industry hot topics. There's a lot going on always. People having affairs, sleeping with judges, getting muscle implants. I don't know. There's always new supplements that everybody's just absolutely crazy about, and in our opinion, leaning on a little bit too much. So we're just going to kind of riff on some things that are going on right now, and engage in an ethical discussion on the we can, but should we question. How do you feel about that, Dean?
Enticing. I feel enticed.
Oh.
I know that one of them you and I have actually discussed. I don't remember where we were walking, but we were walking for a while, and we were discussing ethical enhancement as the general concept, being that, like what is ethically okay, or what do we deem to be ethically okay in the bodybuilding space with regards to enhancing the cosmetic look of a physique.
Mm-hmm.
And then more specifically in that, which I suppose will be the first topic we'll talk about, was where do we draw the line on enhancement being, should you be allowed to get muscle implants just like women are allowed to get breast implants? And or if that is okay or isn't okay, should it then be okay or considered ethical to just use specific site enhancement, like the use of injectable synthol has been one that's been used in bodybuilding for a while, and more new age is like injectable hyaluronic acid, or more like sort of commonly known as mediphorm. And like, what are the difference between these? And is one okay? Is one not okay?
Yeah, I mean, big question. I suppose we'll start here then. When it comes to bodybuilding, we all know it's a sport where the overall physique is judged based on category requirements, ranging from bikini to fitness to bodybuilding and plastic and everything in between, judging between male and female categories there. And there's a ideal physique in mind, this, I don't know, shoulder to waist ratio and symmetry and all of that stuff. So it's a beauty pageant with very extreme standards. Would you say, Dean?
Yeah, very much so.
And bodybuilding is split between natural bodybuilding, where performance enhancing drugs, it sometimes can be a gray line, is not allowed and tested for. And if you're found to be using banned substances, then you get your trophy or placement stripped from you, and you're absolutely cheating if you do take them. And then there's untested, where it's kind of fair game. Everyone knows you're going to be using performance enhancing drugs, and it's not considered cheating. There's some people who would say, well, that second category shouldn't exist at all. I am not one of those people. I know you're not either, Dean. I think that some people may not go into, they may not join the dark side with informed consent. They may not know exactly the risks and sacrifices involved. And, I don't particularly like that element of it. I think that we need to talk more about the risks and sacrifices so people go in with open eyes. So both of us would agree that it would be unethical for people to use banned substances when they're banned, and it's fair game if they're not banned. I would say though, Dean, before I shut up for a moment, that there may be instances where something isn't banned, like, mediphorm, for example. You inject a liquid into the muscle that looks fuller just temporarily. That is allowed within untested federations, but some people might not agree with that. Therefore, the question would be, well, should they use it? Maybe they're at an unfair advantage if they don't, but it rubs them the wrong way. I personally don't feel strongly either way. I don't think that I am for it, but I haven't really thought about it enough to have a very strong opinion. But if something's on the list and you're allowed to do it, fair game, go ahead. But if you think maybe something shouldn't be allowed just because it is, perhaps you should think twice.
Yeah. So as you said, I think anything that is deemed to be cheating, that is directly going against the outlined rules within any federation of any sport, if you do that, I would say that's unethical. Pretty straightforward. So for the purpose of this conversation,
Why is it unethical?
Because I think cheating is unethical in regards to like performance and like being in a performance-based sport, even in a cosmetic or subjective or judge-based sport. I think cheating is unethical.
Okay. It's an unfair advantage is my problem with it.
Yeah. Do you mean specifically cosmetic enhancement now, or are you just talking about cheating in
Any sort
general?
of cheating is an unfair advantage.
But not unethical?
Well, it's unethical because it's an unfair advantage.
Okay, yeah, cool. So um, the unfair advantage you gain from doing things that are classified as cheating, I would say is unethical then. Fair?
Sure.
So for the purpose of at least this bodybuilding discussion, I think none of this is going to be in the domain of natural bodybuilding, tested federations, because there's a lot of things in there that they can't or shouldn't do. But in the untested federation, interestingly, it's not super black and white. And that's one of the difficult things with this discussion in untested bodybuilding, because drug use is obviously occurring, and it's not necessarily said that it's okay, but it's also not okay. And it's not tested, therefore you can't really be found to be doing anything wrong, right?
But it's in the unwritten rules that everyone's taking.
Yes. Within the written rules, though, I do believe there is a line to some description, and this is me paraphrasing, that any noticeable site enhancement will be marked down.
Okay. Can you define
Just
site
like
enhancement for those that don't know what it is?
in this particular conversation, anything that is being done specifically to a muscle via injection most of the time, the way they're talking about here, things that either drive like some extreme inflammation there. So that there's a product called Nolatil, which was quite commonly used back in the day. It's a pro-inflammatory, like this doesn't matter how it works. Anyway, it makes the muscle really like full. There's synthol, which is essentially an oil-based deposit within a muscle to make it look bigger. And then new age is mediphorm, which uses a thing called hyaluronic acid, which is a naturally occurring organic acid in the body, and it's hyperosmotic, so it draws a lot of fluid into the muscle, and that also makes it look bigger. So I believe the rule is, yeah, noticeable site enhancement will be marked down. Okay.
If you do it in a way that it improves your physique, but it's not noticeable, it's not like, oh, there's definitely something injected in there, then it's okay.
Yeah. Because similarly, they'll even say, like, if you're injecting steroids repeatedly in the same muscle, that muscle then has damage. That damage causes a lump or an infection. That is also marked down.
Mm-hmm.
So even though the cosmetic shift is coming from things you're using that you otherwise are technically allowed to use, the consequence of that use is going to be marked down if it's noticeable.
Mm.
And then even similar to that, same with gynecomastia. Like if you're using drugs, which you will be in order to get the look that you want, but it causes you to get gyno, and then that gyno is so noticeable. So like this is inflammation of breast tissue behind the nipple. Yeah. If that is noticeable, then you also will be marked out. So there's no clear rule as to what is or isn't allowed necessarily here, but there are some pretty defining, I suppose, sentences and expectations around what it should look like or shouldn't look like. And that is where there's this gray area of discussion of like, I don't know, is it ethical to use site enhancement?
Mm. I don't really see those rules as being vague in the sense like, well, can we or can we not use them? I see it as being, hey, we're not disallowing, is that a word?
Yeah.
We're not disallowing this substance, but what we don't want is
for it to be visible.
You would be marked down for having like a lump in a place like of where you put the injection, for example, because the sport is a beauty pageant and that doesn't align with what we're marking as being beautiful.
Yeah. Yeah, it'd be like having a massive scar that goes across something that impedes your capacity, but it impedes the look of it potentially. Like actually that's not necessarily true, because if it's, unless it completely cuts the muscle belly in half or something, and then there's asymmetry, you're getting marked down on symmetrical issues, but the scar itself is not causing the problem. So that was me misspeaking.
Well, maybe it's an example would be more like this. You're not allowed to have an injury, but if you've torn your pec and your pecs are, significantly different from the left and right, you're going to get marked down on it, even though injuries aren't banned.
Yeah. Yeah. It's funny. I've even heard people say, like, I don't think you should be marked down for that smaller pec because it's torn. Like, hang on a minute. Like, this is a sport of symmetry. So like, it's your job to manage your injury risk profile so that you don't have these things that could otherwise impede your look. So again, like, it's not like, yeah, you're not being told, oh, you can't have an injury, but you have to understand that by having the injury, there's going to be an effect on your marks.
Same with tattoos, right? Like they allow tattoos, but tattoos that are really busy could get in the way of seeing the striations, and then you'll be marked down for looking smoother.
Absolutely. Yeah. So I guess then if I've just outlined this, then is if no one is gaining a unfair advantage on the assumption that they're not cheating by using these things, generally speaking, provided that it's not done in a manner that is obvious to it being site enhancement, is it ethical?
Are we talking about like synthol and mediphorm
Yeah,
specifically?
yeah, on those two.
Okay. And then I think we should separate this from implants,
Actual
from muscle.
surgical implants, yeah, very different
Yeah,
again.
because I think they are different. So can we start with implants? Because it's just easier for me to get my head around. Oh, and then I suppose we need to split that between breast implants, which aren't a muscle, is that's kind of mimicking the female breast tissue, and muscle implants like biceps or abs or something like that. Starting with the latter, it's banned in both tested and untested, as far as I know. I think it should be, because I think that bodybuilding, you know, being the beauty pageant that it is, you still have to, like, its values are hard work and excellence, and you haven't worked for that implant. It's not your muscle. So I don't think it should be allowed, because we're marking people on how good their surgeons are or how much disposable income they have to turn themselves into a human Ken doll. Do you agree with that, Dean?
Yes, I think introducing a foreign body that you otherwise had no capacity to, or haven't had the ability to produce yourself or grow yourself, is without question for me stepping over the line of site enhancement to the point that it would be classified as unethical and cheating.
Yeah, and so this is why I'm not sure how I feel about injectable site enhancements like mediphorm or synthol, something that you're just injecting to fill up the muscle temporarily. Because I think, although, yes, there's obvious difference between that and muscular implants, it's a bit of a slippery slope. It's still something that you're putting into your body that you haven't grown yourself, even with the assistance of performance enhancing drugs. And so I just feel a bit funny about it. It's not against the rules to use it, but I think that if I was an enhanced bodybuilder that was competing, I would think twice about using it, because even though I might put myself at an unfair advantage because other people are, it's still, I'm not sure if it aligns with my values. Dean?
Well, I suppose that what would be the difference then about an individual just solely injecting their biceps repeatedly for years on end with steroids, knowing that steroids themselves aren't going to site enhance that spot, in that they're not having a direct impact on the muscle growth there and or even really the size of it, except for the fact that eventually maybe the scarification and even just the effect being repeatedly like injected with has on a muscle tissue and its look and its feel is going to enhance the look of that muscle anyway. So it's more long term, it's not acute. But like, then again, what's the difference?
It's not even worth considering. Like, you know, you're injecting this steroid into your bicep or your glute or your pec or whatever. It's going to have a, what's the word, like a holistic effect on your growth. The growth that you're getting from a little bit of scar tissue, you're not even going to notice it enough to consider. So I do you disagree with that? Is that what that face
Yeah,
is?
I would, because people that repeatedly inject their delts, their shoulders, in certain poses, it becomes more and more noticeable that over years and years of abuse into that same muscle tissue, that it gets to like a point where it's like so tensile and so like tough. Like, it's no longer like a soft, palpable muscle. It's becoming like quite full and scarified, so to speak. That even in a front relaxed, the roundness of that tissue becomes greater and greater and greater and greater. Whereas a person who hasn't really injected them so much, sometimes it just flattens out. So there is definitely like an enhancement to the look of a shoulder that has been repeatedly injected over the years. And the elite tier, sort of top end guys have been doing it for years and years, have a very different look to their shoulders to what you will see in like an amateur bodybuilder who's only just started injecting. And you can see this acutely even in amateur bodybuilding, when it's just unfortunately done poorly, and that a person has literally injected the exact same 2-3 centimeter section repeatedly, and they have this one bobble point of muscle that now just sits out. Then they get marked down for it because it looks bad. But you know, take somebody who does it very smartly over the years and years and years and years, and actually start to get an enhanced look in that delt.
I'm open to the fact that just because I feel a certain way doesn't mean it's correct. I still don't feel like it's the same thing, maybe because it takes years and years and years for that to develop. There's a risk that it will develop not in their favor if it's done poorly.
That risk definitely exists with synthol, probably even more so than with injectable steroids, because it's not as easily assimilated or metabolized in the tissue. It sits within there like a depot, they will call it. Like, it sits within that tissue and doesn't really move much.
Well,
Um,
synthol gets dispersed over 6 months or so, no?
no, this is one of the problems with synthol is it's like dead weight within a muscle tissue. It's very, very, very difficult for the body to break that down. Conversely, mediphorm, which uses hyaluronic acid, is the absolute opposite in that it is naturally disperses across the muscle belly. It's typically put in like an aqueous solution, so like water-based. And then it's metabolized very efficiently by the body, and it's broken down over time to the point where it'll eventually disappear. The excess amount of it, whereas the excess amount of the oil from synthol, not so much. And that is why you will see some people that have had the capacity over years, like what was his name? Greg Valentino was like a very famous guy. The man whose arms exploded was the tagline for him in YouTube. It was just repeated enhancement via oil to his biceps, and they just sat there like dead weight. And even to this day, those things will never look the same. So it's definitely different. I think the largest problem that most people probably have with site injection is honestly its route of administration, in that it's injectable. Because I kind of categorize enhancement differently now that I've thought about it more and more and more over time. So like I think you have like general long-term enhancement, like we talked about, steroids, training, food, like you eat more carbohydrates to make a muscle look larger, you eat less food to make body fat come down, like they're all just sort of general. You have like very specific site enhancement, in that you could do, you may only pump up your biceps backstage, because they're small, and you may not pump up your triceps or your delts because they're too large. So like very acute, but obviously natural, right? I think then the difference between the synthols, the hyaluronic acids, and the implants is whether or not it's foreign for me as to whether or not I have a big problem with it.
They're all foreign.
Hyaluronic acid is not. I think hyaluronic acid is technically.
Neither is testosterone, but like you can't say that if you're injecting testosterone, you're still natural because you're injecting it synthetically, like you're injecting.
No, but that's a different question. That's a different argument. So like you need the amount of steroids taken in order to achieve the muscularity in an untested federation to be competitive. Like everybody's doing that. That is absolutely necessary. And you cannot make that amount of muscle natural. So I think like it kind of gets put in the category of this is a necessity if you want to look a particular way. You don't need hyaluronic acid. You don't need synthol, but they both offer advantages potentially to the right person, right?
Just for people who are getting confused, hyaluronic acid is mediphorm. That's the
Correct.
name of the what's it called? Trademarked name.
Yeah.
We're just using them interchangeably.
And for reference for people, like hyaluronic acid is the active ingredient used in things like lip filler that you see heavily used around the Gold Coast. So I categorize them differently in that I see hyaluronic acid as essentially an injectable version of creatine on steroids.
Okay.
That's the way I perceive it to be in regards to like what category does it sit in? It's a naturally occurring organic acid, cool, tick. If I could consume this orally, would it be beneficial to me? Not that I'm aware of. Actually, there may be some benefits downstream. I don't know what they are. Can I rub it on topically? And is there advantages? Yeah, there is. Like it'll tighten up skin, it'll make skin look more plump. Like there's all of these things that it does. If I was to take creatine orally, what will it do? It will actually cause intramuscular swelling via fluid retention. So it's doing the same thing that hyaluronic acid is doing inside the muscle. The only major difference between the two of them is that hyaluronic acid is an injectable and creatine is oral. Where I differentiate then between synthol and hyaluronic acid is I see synthol as essentially an injectable implant because it's dead foreign matter being put inside a tissue to create something that doesn't exist.
That's an interesting way of looking at it.
Hyaluronic acid here is like an injectable enhancement of fluid retention. But if you don't have the muscle, it doesn't actually make it look any better, really, because you still require the years and years of steroid use and or weight training and all the other cosmetic things that you do in order for that to be effective.
Yeah, I don't really accept mediphorm's active ingredient is natural, and like I see that as the natural fallacy. The fact that you're injecting a natural thing, tick, that's what makes it okay. Like I reject that. But I think maybe I'm a little bit more convinced of its ethical use, given that you're right, you would have had to have worked for the muscle in the first place. Like increasing the size of a muscle that's huge is going to look much larger than increasing the size of an untrained muscle.
Mm.
I feel like that's slightly convinced me. I'm definitely not, for the record, saying that anybody who's used mediphorm, for example, is cheating and you're awful. I'm just saying I don't know how I feel about it. I'm still kind of figuring it out. And it's okay if we always feel a bit iffy about something. We don't always have to have strong opinions on everything.
Yeah. I mean, I certainly sat more in the camp of like, it doesn't feel right to me.
Yeah.
But I had someone challenge me and to say, but why? Like, explain it to me.
Yeah.
And the more I try to like think about like what my reason was for it, I think it almost always like kind of came down to it was this uneasy feeling of I'm injecting something artificially to enhance the look of something. But then as I thought that, I think, hang on a minute, like if I can orally take, consume carbohydrates in a peak week in order to make myself look fuller, okay, that's acute enhancement of the physique. If I can do the same with creatine, that's acute enhancement of the physique.
Mm.
All right, cool. So I can do all of those to naturally enhance muscular fullness. Sweet. Why can't I inject something that also naturally enhances muscular fullness?
Is injecting something natural though?
Well, this is where I think, is there such thing as an injectable fallacy? Um, because I think a lot of people have a problem with route of administration more than they have with the actual mechanism of action.
Right, because if I could swallow a tablet of mediphorm that found its way into my muscles and then it made, would I feel more comfortable with it? Maybe I would. So think you've got something there.
I honestly think that's the biggest problem that people
Mm.
have to get over that, because but where the differentiation is that if we accept that the injection might be the initial problem, okay, then why don't we accept the injection of synthol? And then for me, it comes back to the implant concept, is that you're injecting a foreign body to achieve something that you otherwise haven't had the capacity to do naturally, and or couldn't even achieve naturally. So that's literally like putting an implant in, as far as I'm concerned there.
Mm.
Um,
Yeah, I wouldn't draw too much of a firm line though between synthol being kind of like a liquid implant. I really liked like that kind of
mm,
framing of it. Um, and mediphorm, because even though, yes, sure, mediphorm's active ingredient is something that occurs naturally, like not in the doses that it does
mm,
inside the syringe. So like I see the distinction, but I just don't think it's a firm line. It's more of a gray area in my mind.
yeah. I mean, even just as a random offshoot, I think something like mediphorm could actually be considered, and I actually think we spoke about this on Joe Jeffrey's podcast with Austin Stout, and that was optimal physique development is the name of it. Sorry, I was just walking there for a second, and that was that it could actually be arguable that using something like site enhancement from like a mediphorm might be a better and or healthier choice specifically for females that are competing in divisions like bikini,
Okay, why?
whereby they have the opportunity to like try and enhance muscular fullness in the body parts that matter to them the most, or are e.g. delts and glutes, without having to worry about competing against women that are prepared to take androgens.
Mm.
So like at the end of the day, is they're in a cosmetic sport. They've trained as much as they possibly could to enhance the muscularity of those groups, and then towards the very end, they're just looking for something like hair, makeup, and tan to enhance the look just that little bit more. Like, do they go for the oral androgen or the injectable androgen and come with the risk of virilization, or is something like hyaluronic acid or mediphorm in this instance a better choice? And like, it certainly would be a healthier choice.
Yeah.
But again, you have to get past the route of administration or the injectable fallacy.
Right. You've heard it here first, coined by Dean, injectable fallacy. I don't really see that as the two options for females, by the way, androgens or
Of course
mediphorm.
not.
I think that when it comes to untested federations, even in bikini, as things get more and more competitive, females basically all have to take androgens. It's a matter of like, well, do I cause back issues because I need my, if you're doing wellness, for example, or I don't know, issues in the hip from having too much load from trying to hypertrophy the lower half, things like that. Do I just take androgens to using the safer use model and then use mediphorm to enhance my glutes momentarily for a show or something like that?
Yeah. There's a hell of a lot of discussion around like better ways to go about it. It's just more so just that mediphorm in this instance might offer an advantage without the potential disadvantages of those other things. Because I mean,
Yeah.
you should technically be able to compete in bikini without the use of any androgens. That's for sure.
We obviously
You're,
don't have the statistics on this, do we? Like nobody does, because people are quite, well, not definitely not in the UK, but for the most part, people are quite private about their drug use. But I would be very surprised if we had a significant portion of females even competing in the bikini federations, which is the least muscular of all of the categories, that are natural.
No, I don't think they'd be natural in that. I think they're definitely using things like thyroid. I think they're definitely considering the use of things like clenbuterol,
Yeah.
your himbine, all of these other things that would otherwise be illegal to use in
a
natural
natural
federations.
federation.
But they may not actually be using androgenics,
Okay,
androgenic
gotcha.
anabolic steroids.
Fair. Okay, yeah, good point. Let's talk about titties, shall we? Breast implants. So they're different to muscular implants, aren't they? Because boobs aren't, well, I mean, we have pecs, but we're not talking about pecs. We're talking about breast tissue, and I guess the fat that is typically there for a female that isn't there for a physique competitor who is so lean that they've lost fat in that area. Now, obviously, they're not replacing a muscle that's there. They're replacing the fat that's there, or maybe even the breast tissue that wasn't there in the first place. I do consider it as being performance enhancing in the sense that the performance that we're trying to achieve is a particular physique, right? How you physically actually perform on the day outside of not cramping while you pose doesn't matter how you perform. It matters how you look on the day and how you present. And having implants does add to that overall look, but it's not something that you've worked for or that is part of your genetic makeup. So I do think that it could be considered performance enhancing. Is that wrong? I mean, that's what we're debating now. When it comes to natural federations, perhaps, because we're trying to look at what you can do just through food and nutrition and nothing synthetic. Like, well, I guess we could consider whey protein and creatine synthetic.
Saying caffeine and all that jazz, right?
Yeah.
A piece of string.
Yeah, like you're not sleeping on a cave floor, you're sleeping in a bed. Like, how far do we take this?
Yeah.
But when it comes to untested federations and you're allowed drugs and mediphorm and things like that, perhaps they should be allowed, because why would you arbitrarily draw the line? Yeah, it's a tricky one.
My understanding is that breasts are not marked in women's
But the overall
bodybuilding.
package is marked and it adds to the overall package.
It is. But the overall package is, I'm not disagreeing with you, by the way. I'm just,
Okay.
To play devil's advocate. They're looking at, how wide is the clavicle in figure and how small is the waist and what is the taper like here? And do they have sufficient muscularity from top to bottom, front to back? What's the condition like? Is there symmetry, etc.? All of these things are the things they're actually looking at. And they're all largely defined by, their skeletal structure and then the muscle that's on top of it. Technically speaking, the boobs that are in the middle in one particular spot don't really come into play. Like, they're not being marked. However, I think that they can definitely add somewhat to the silhouette, in that very, very, very large breasts, when turned side on, can ruin that physique's look a little bit. And I've seen that before in women's figure and women's bodybuilding. Interestingly, some of the biggest boobs in women's bodybuilding are in women's physique and bodybuilding. In the least, like, I'm sorry to kill for that, the least technically feminine by normal standards, asterisks don't come at me, like, go for the biggest boobs, which is kind of weird. So I don't have a problem with breast implants in because I don't think they're technically marked, and I think it's just a choice of yours around like what your preferences are for whatever this perceived femininity is. And like, if it makes you feel good, maybe you do perform better, and maybe it does enhance your capacity. But I don't think the actual implant itself is changing the result. Like, I don't think if you had competitor one flat chest,
results, couldn't it? Could
like, I don't know, it's tough.
Yeah, but just for the record, I have fake boobs. I'm not like against them and saying you shouldn't have them. We're just debating their role in bodybuilding.
Yeah, it's tough because I think, like, you know how this, but if you had two identical fit physiques standing side by side, from a clavicle width structure to a waist structure to a quad structure, all this sort of thing, and one had fake boobs and one had a flat chest, technically those two should be marked exactly the same. Therefore, it would be a tie. The question would be, and they were just as beautiful as each other and had the same hair. If they were like literally genetically identical and the only difference was just boobs on, they should technically be marked the same. So then we could say, no, but so then we could say that in this scenario that would never occur, that it would be a tie and that the boobs provided no advantage. The question that's difficult to answer, it's easy to ask, is whether or not, if you have two slightly different females and one of them has implants and one of them doesn't, and those implants drive just a little bit more femininity and a little bit more pizzazz on stage, and maybe it shifts the look marginally to like give it more statuesque look, then that would get them the advantage, and therefore it is an advantage. It's not illegal though, so it's definitely not unethical, I don't think.
Well, I mean,
But
there's things
maybe
that
it's
are legal
unfair
that,
because people don't have the capacity to afford the implants. I don't know.
yeah, I mean, you could say that for good coaches and performance enhancing drugs
Yeah.
and mediphorm as well. But Dean, what was that point that you just made? Oh, that it's not unethical because it's allowed. Like cheating is unethical, but it's not illegal. So like I don't really like that distinction. I mean, okay, let's consider this when it comes to boobs as well. Unfortunately, in some federations, whether they say it outright or whether it's sort of just known, there's politics involved. And you know, WBFF, which no longer exists, is now what, FMG or something like
Well,
that.
it's not FMG. They're very separate. Let's just
Oh,
give
sorry.
FMG the due diligence that they have zero relation to WBFF because
What
nobody
is the
wants to associate with
relationship
them.
then that I'm confusing? It's the same owners or something like that.
The promoters, at least in the instance of Australia, who used to promote WBFF, cancelled that affiliation, completely stepped away from them, and created a brand new federation that stands on its own.
Okay.
Called FMG.
Right, FMG. For the record, I am not a prep coach.
Yeah.
So I don't coach people for competitions, which is why I don't know this. Radio. So where was they going with that?
Like you're saying
so
that
some
there's
federations,
unwritten or unspoken, yeah.
right? Some federation, there's politics in all federations, but some federations say that you know, we want you to have over this amount of followers on social media, or if it's a pretty close tie, they might give it to somebody that is more popular online and help them promote their federation. And would boobs help somebody's popularity online? Like I would argue probably. And would that have some influence on a result if it's kind of close? Like also, yeah, probably.
Yeah, I mean, I don't disagree with that they would, but I suppose the question here is whether or not implants that are non-muscular are in the same category of discussion of ethical enhancement. I'm going to say no,
Okay.
because I think they are legitimately separate in that they're non-muscular. Yes, they are still a foreign body, but I don't think that they are technically marked. Therefore, I don't think that I could technically say that they are unethical.
Not technically marked, but
yeah.
Okay, fair. Hey, how about this? I've had implants over the muscle and I've had implants under the muscle. And N equals one, anecdotal, sure, but I definitely noticed that with my pecs, getting the implants under the muscle made my actual pec muscle look bigger because I had something under them pushing them forward. And kind of just overnight, as soon as the swelling went down, I was like, oh wow, my actual pec muscles look bigger, as well as the fact that I have better boobs now. Fantastic. So I like, maybe if they are under the muscle, it could be considered performance enhancing because it's highlighting the pec muscle.
Yeah, but I mean, conversely, if you put them over the muscle and then you have just what looks like two big bolt-ons on top of tissue, it's distracting and it's not necessarily a positive look. But it could be detracting from the look.
Yeah. Okay. But if done in a way that does enhance the look, it could be considered performance enhancing.
Yeah, I mean, if it's enhancing the actual musculature of the pec in that it's fuller, then yes, there would be some moderate site enhancement there.
Yeah.
But so here, okay, here's an interesting one. I wonder whether or not, again, let's just say you get two identical people and you give one girl, like, just pick the smallest possible cc's that you could. We just said, well, hey, I went and got my boobs done and I got 50 cc's put in, right? Like real small. And they stuffed it underneath the pec and they just filled the pecs out so they were just a bit fuller, but they didn't really look like boobs, right? Still the same like augmentation, right? Versus a B girl goes in and gets 300 cc's. I don't even know if that's a lot. And they're actual boobs now.
It's a pretty averagely large boob
Okay,
job.
but they're noticeable actual breasts. I wish people in the video could see me doing this, actual breasts, I'm holding watermelons. I would say that if you ask people, like, did this person do something to enhance their physique, and then did this person just do something to enhance their femininity, just for this topic of conversation, to say that boobs are feminine and pecs are non-feminine, just for this moment, I would actually say that people would probably like, hey, the girl who got the 50 cc is just cheating because she just enhanced her pecs but didn't give herself boobs. But the girl who got the 300 cc's got boobs and enhanced her pecs, but because she got boobs, she didn't do anything wrong.
Yeah.
Do you think that would be fair? I think that might. I think that might be fair.
I think it exists on a spectrum, and different people would have different kind of cutoffs on that spectrum of what would be considered pec enhancement and like just getting a big pair of cans.
Yeah. So for the win of the men of this world, we can now say unequivocally that if you want to consider yourself to get ethical boob enhancement as a figure or bikini competitor, or any competitor for that matter, you have to get them big enough that you have boobies.
Is that what we're saying?
Yeah.
As
if
just
they're
the
too small,
arbiter of truth.
If they're too small, you just went and enhanced your pecs and you're a cheat.
You heard it here first, folks. Yeah, I suppose there's no like real answer that we can come to, because everybody's going to arrive at the answer with different things in mind, considering different things, giving more or less weight to different considerations. But I do think that it's an interesting one to think about, and whether or not something is allowed or not allowed in the rules matters, because we shouldn't do things that are against the rules. But also, if something goes against your rules, the rules of your heart, perhaps you also shouldn't do it.
Yeah, I would say that you need to look inward and really think about like what you're comfortable doing. But you can't also, if you do look inward and decide that one of these things is unethical, even though you can't necessarily give a fair reason as to why, like there's just an ick about it, that you probably can't be mad at people that are willing to do it if it still falls within the rules of that particular competition.
Well, think about, just because you feel ick about something, does that actually mean it's wrong? Like how I feel
correct,
about it.
Yeah. Because like I felt ick about mediphorm. The more I sat on it and tried to like talk myself into the reasons why I was right, I actually came up with more reasons why I might have been wrong, which are probably what's come about today on this conversation. And I'm okay with my clear definement between foreign versus non-foreign to a degree. I still think there's errors in that argument. But yeah, maybe we've given some people some things to think about, both in like what they're willing to do themselves, but also what who and how and what they should or shouldn't judge in regards to these things, because it's certainly a sliding scale. There's definitely no black and white answers, and it is very gray.
Yeah.
But what do you do?
For sure. So when we sat down to think about the notes for this podcasting, we also had lots of other things we wanted to talk about, like digestive aids and what else was there? Like, cold plungers, new science, things.
Overhyping new evidence. Yeah, it's a big one. But it's a ick of mine, but yeah.
Maybe we'll save that for another day. We just talked about tits and mediphorm for 45 minutes, which I'm happy about. That's fine by me. But maybe we'll wrap it up there, shall we? And we'll give a less shit tip.
Yeah, my less shit tip is, if you're going to do it well so that no one can tell. Not actually. Honestly, my be less shit tip for this stuff would be like it's largely unnecessary for the large majority of people. But if it was something that you were going to do, then yeah, it's. Man, I don't even know if I have a less shit tip on that. I'll just stick with my joking one. If you got to do it well enough that you can't tell.
Okay, that you're not going to be marked down for it is actually the serious tip.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, don't overdo it. Like, we're only talking about small modifications or enhancements to like bias a look towards something being slightly larger. We're not trying to create something out of thin air. That is definitely a fair, I think, be less shit tip. Don't try and inject a bicep. Just make the bicep bigger.
Okay. Final question. Would you rather? I'm going to ask you, right?
Yeah. I mean, I'm useless at these, as you know.
Yeah, well, that's why I said I'm going to think of one now. Not you. Would you rather? Okay. How far out of a competition would you take mediphorm? Like a week?
Anywhere from 8 weeks to the week of, yeah. Week of.
Okay. So you know that you can't overdo it because you'll get marked down, right? But you've never done mediphorm before, and there's a risk that you could overdo it and get marked down for it. But if you don't do it, you're not going to be as full as you might actually be. It could cost you the placing, given how competitive things are nowadays. Okay. Would you rather go for it, hoping that you're not going to overdo it and it will enhance your physique, or B, not do it because it might be easy for you to overdo it and get marked down on it because it's obvious?
So do nothing in fear of it being a problem,
or
do something in hope that it doesn't become one. This would depend on what I'm trying to achieve at that competition. If I'm just a run-of-the-mill
first place, isn't that everyone's goal?
Yeah, but if I'm kind of like in the early stages of my bodybuilding career, let's call it, and like I'm trying to win just like a regional or a slightly national title, I wouldn't take the risk. I would just roll on through and see how I compare without any kind of site enhancement whatsoever.
Okay.
I would also say the same to that if I didn't think that my physique was as close to as developed as I can probably get it after multiple years of training.
Okay.
If I think my physique is as developed as I'm probably going to get it, and I'm also pushing for like trying to win the title, like a national title that would otherwise then qualify me for a pro card or pro card status, I'd probably risk it for the biscuit. But my personality would also risk it for the biscuit in a very controlled manner. So like the likelihood of mistake is probably pretty low.
In
and I
this would
also
rather it's not.
yeah, in this instance, then I'd probably personally go for not using it, because I would hate to lose through making a mistake as opposed to losing because it just wasn't good enough.
Okay. Okay.
You know?
So you're not going to do it, but you would extra not do it if you weren't at your like potential yet.
Yeah, because I think you got a long way to go yet. There's still going to be plenty of site enhancement to happen over time.
Yeah.
You know, so
Through training and drugs and nutrition.
Just be fucking patient, mate.
Just be patient.
Yeah. The only time I would actually change that opinion though is if I had an injury. If I had an injury that was like cosmetically unfixable, like a tear,
okay,
I'd for sure take the risk on that.
Okay.
I'm just trying to balance that out a little bit.
I accept your answer.
Because the asymmetry is going to cost you anyway, so you may as well fucking have a go.
Yeah. Cool. Well, thanks for coming along for the ride, everyone, and we'll see you in the next episode. 5-star reviews, comments, all that good stuff.
Ciao.